Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Xarian webinar. My name is Jonathan Su. I'm going to be hosting the webinar today, and we have a special webinar focused on what is possible with APIs and specifically how to use the iFormBuilder API. And Solutions Engineer Penny Lau will be our presenter today. I want to thank everybody for joining today's webinar. As we get close to the end of the year, we're really excited to have everyone here for this special topic webinar. We know that APIs are a topic and a concept that a lot of people have questions about, and we're happy to go ahead and start explaining some of this and hopefully help you become more comfortable and begin using the APIs as well. Now, before we get into the rest of the webinar, I do want to go over some news and updates in terms of what's going on in the world of Xarian. The first thing is our blog has actually been extremely active as of late. We've been putting out a lot of content in different areas. And I have here a list of 3 links to the 3 most recent blog posts. I would definitely recommend you all go and check this out during your free time and also engage with us around the content as well. And then finally, to round out the year, we do have 2 more webinars lined up for the end of November and then the middle of December before the holiday season. So the first webinar coming up is going to be Cooking with Xarian. We did this webinar last year and felt like it was really helpful for customers. We were able to reference the different recipes or solutions that we had contributed together for to people throughout the year. And so we want to do that again. Last year, we focused solely on form building. This year, we're going to continue to have a focus on form building, but we will also include solutions focused on reports and documents as well. And then finally, our last webinar of the year is going to be on the URL scheme element. This is actually a very unused element, but despite it not being used that frequently, it's actually extremely powerful. And so Solutions Engineer Barrett Johannesson and Ben Ray are going to be going through this webinar in December, and we're looking forward to having that be the webinar to close out our year. Now, before I hand the webinar over to Penny, I did want to launch a couple of real quick polls. The first poll I'm going to launch here is our standard poll that we launch at the beginning of every webinar. And we simply want to see if you are a current user or not. This allows Penny to be a little bit more specific with the content she's going to present, as she'll know our audience a little bit better. All right, as the votes are coming in, we're just about done with everybody responding. I'll wait for a couple more seconds and then close this out. And Penny, just so you know, it looks like the majority of customers are iFormBuilder only customers. We do have some customers who use the full Xarian Web Services suite. And we also have people here who are not customers, but they're just here to learn more, which is awesome. All right, I've closed that poll out, and now we're just going to launch the second poll, and after that, I'm going to hand this over. This second poll, again, in the spirit of trying to get a little bit more information and knowledge about the viewers, is just going to ask you how comfortable you are and familiar you are with APIs. All right, as these votes are coming in, it looks like we have a pretty wide spread of experience, which is awesome for this webinar. I'm glad to see that some people are writing custom API integrations, and I'm also happy to see that some people here don't even know what an API is or have very little understanding about it. This webinar should be a great opportunity for you to learn more about it, and I'm happy to see people trying to learn a little bit more. All right, I'm going to close out this poll and share the results real quickly. And you'll see that we have an almost even split across all 5 of the different options. So again, Penny, it looks like you have a diverse audience here today. And we're happy to hear what you have to say. So at this point, Penny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Penny, and I'm a solutions engineer with Xarian. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for joining my webinar. This is actually one of the few times I've ever done webinars. Most of the time, I work with customers and help them build solutions, implement projects, and we do a lot of technical stuff and use APIs a lot. That's also where the topic of this webinar comes from. Because API is so powerful and can do so many things, I think it is important to share our experience with it with you all. If you think this is helpful, we would love to do more in the future and share our expertise and knowledge, so please feel free to leave your comments and thoughts. Before I start, just wanted to give you an agenda of this webinar. First, I'll talk about some basic concept of API and how API works. Then I'll start with some examples outside of iFormBuilder just to give you an idea. Then I'll go back to iFormBuilder and demonstrate how to make API requests. And at the end, share some use cases where API are being used to give you some perspectives in terms of how to apply API technology in your business. All right, let's get started. First, of course, is this question. What is API? Technically, API stands for Application Program Interface. We all know Graphical User Interface, also known as GUI. So GUI is a modern way for people to interact with computers and machines, and it also allows users to communicate with electronic devices through graphical icons, more visual and straightforward instead of having to write command lines, which people had to do decades ago. Likewise, API is the interface for programmers. It makes it easier for developers to build applications. It allows developers to access the functionalities of other software components through well-defined data structures. This might still sound very confusing to you, but we'll dive deeper. If you look at this graph, on the left end is the database or the server, and on the right end are different types of clients or applications. In between them, there are two ways to access the database. One is through the business logic, which is also the user interface, where you log in, download data, or manage profiles and do all those things. And there's another way, which is through API. And API is a machine-to-machine interface rather than a user interface. It allows the application to read the data from the database without having to go through the user interface. APIs are everywhere. Most large companies or mature businesses have built web APIs for their customers or for internal use. And most modern websites consume at least some third-party APIs. Here are just a couple examples for you. First, you've probably heard of some companies packaging APIs as products. For example, there's a website called Weather Underground, and they sell access to its weather data API. And second, Amazon. So Amazon is a website we all use, and just giving you an example of API on Amazon. So let's say you got something, you bought something on Amazon, and your package will be picked up by a shipping company and get delivered to you eventually. And you'll be able to track the status of the delivery in Amazon. So what Amazon does is Amazon uses the API provided by the shipping company and then displayed those information on their own website. Third example, let's say you want to build a website of your own, a website of history, and you can use the API provided by New York Times, where you can access the data of all the posts that New York Times have ever published. There are so many APIs you can use nowadays, and here's just a quick summary of the biggest benefits of using API. First, automation. With APIs, computers rather than people can manage the work. And through APIs, people can update workflows to make them quicker and more productive. Second, integration. APIs allow data to be embedded from any site or application more easily. This guarantees more fluid information delivery and integrated workflow. Third, new data available. Using API opens the door to a variety of data on the internet. Four, efficiency, of course. Using an API, the content generated can be published automatically and is available for every channel. It allows it to be shared and distributed more easily. And last, personalization. Through APIs, any user or company can customize the content and services and fit them into your own workflows in your own business. Next, we will want to have a look at how API looks like. So the data in database, which we also call resources, are represented by URLs. Now, the example in this slide shows how you can get access to the user resource. And there is a couple methods you can use on these resources: get, post, put, delete. Get is to read the data. Post is to create the data. Put is to update the data. And delete, of course, is to delete the data. So the combination of a URL and a method makes what we call an API call. After you made an API request to server, what does it return to you then? So it returns a structured data format called JSON. A JSON object consists of a set of key value pairs. So what you're looking at is an API response returned by Facebook. On the left-hand side, ID, name, and pictures are all keys, and on the right-hand side are the values of them. So after you make an API request and get the data in the response, you can consume these data and use them wherever you want, however you want. And next, I'd also like to talk about another very important mechanism or concept of API, which is authentication. Basically, authentication is to let API provider know that you are a trusted entity who is trying to access their data. When you request API request from an API provider, you will get a key, and you use this key to open the door to their data. This is what we call authentication. So conventionally, people use password to access an application, but in API, you use token, and a token is not permanent. It will expire after a short period of time, and you need to keep using your key to generate new tokens. This ensures the security of the data. After talking about what API is and how it works from a higher level, how do we get started with API? First of all, you need to know what APIs are provided by the service provider. So iFormBuilder has a very comprehensive documentation of all the API requests you can use. Now I'm opening up our documentation. So in this documentation, you can see that all the API requests that are available are categorized into different resources: user, page, element, option list, record. So this is the documentation you want to refer to when building your own API application. And after we have this documentation in hand, where can we test these APIs? Here, I want to recommend to you a very handy tool called Postman. So Postman is a tool for API testing and request management. It is a widely used tool by the developers, and we at Xarium use it a lot too internally. We would recommend you to download a Postman client and then import our API samples and add them to your collection. And next, I'm going to show you a few examples of API requests through Postman. First, I'm going to open up my Postman client. And in here, I have a couple of collections. And on the top of it is the iFormBuilder API. And this is what we're going to use. And next, I'm going to pull over my iFormBuilder interface. Just want to make sure that I'm still signing.
Hey, Penny, I had a quick question for you.
Sure.
So when you say that the Postman holds the iFormBuilder collection or the library, what exactly does that mean?
So we have built some API samples for our customers, and after you import the collection, the samples to a collection, it will look like this. So there are 86 requests that are available, and if you click into them, they are already ready to for you to use. You simply need to replace the server name with your own and the profile ID and stuff, and of course you need to have new tokens for it. So it's really convenient.
So if somebody else were to download Postman, download the library for iFormBuilder, they would get these templates and then be able to start messing with the API, assuming that they create an access token to use.
Exactly.
Awesome.
All right, so now I'm logged into my iFormBuilder environment, and the server is called loadapp.iFormBuilder.com. And next, I'm going to register an API app in this environment. I'm going to create a new client called API Webinar and select my own user. Now I got the client key and client secret, and you will be using the client key and secret to be able to generate access tokens. And now I'm going to generate a one-time access token. This token will expire in 3,600 seconds, which is also one hour. And I'm going to use this token to send API requests. And next, I'm going back to my Postman client. Let's see what we want to do here. So first, I like to create a username, a new user in my environment. And I'm replacing the server name with my own load app, and then copy and paste my profile ID. And in the headers part, I'll have to put in a new fresh access token to be able to make it to work. All right. And then in the body part, this is where you send the data from. So I'm going to create a new username called API Webinar, and I leave my password as this, and then email to my own email address. Now I'm going ahead and hit send. So at the bottom of this page, you can see that this is the response part. So this indicates it's a successful API request, and it returns the ID of this new user I just created. And then I'm going back to my iFormBuilder page and check if my new user is over there. There you go. So this API Webinar is the new user I just created.
Awesome. Penny, I had another quick question. So after we added in the 3 pieces of information, the server name, the profile ID, and then the access token, when we sent in the request, is that a like a sandbox environment, or is that actually affecting your live environment that you have for iFormBuilder?
This is my live environment.
Okay, so you're actually making changes to a real profile.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yep.
Do you have any examples of where you'd want to create a user or where you have created a user in a real use case that you could explain to the attendees?
Sure. So let's say that you have a need to frequently add new users in iFormBuilder, but it's too time consuming to create them one by one on the user page. Then you can use this API to automate this process. For example, you can create your own website page for people to enter their first name and last name and email address. And then as soon as they hit the button, a new user will be created in iFormBuilder.
Okay, very cool. So that web form would actually have the the API script behind the scenes to do the user creation automatically instead of going into Postman and doing it yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, next, let's try another one. Let's try a different method. Let's update the record in my form. So I already created a form for this webinar called API training form. And inside of this form, there's one record. Penny, what is your name? Penny, what is your last name? Lau, and what is the title? Solutions Engineer. And I'm going to up this record from API. So I'm going to pull this update a record API and do the same thing. First, I'm replacing the server name with load app and profile ID. Also, we need page ID, the form ID. So page ID, copy and paste it to here. And to be able to identify which record we want to update, we also need the record ID. And this record ID is 2. So we're putting 2 over here. And in the headers part, we need this access token. It won't expire in 1 hour, so we can still keep using it. And then in this body part, so this is this is JSON also. You'll have to send JSON data to iFormBuilder. So it's in the same structure as the response. And I'm going to put ID 2 here, and element name. Element name is actually the data column name in iFormBuilder. So I believe I have the first column as first name, and I'm going to update the value from Penny to Jonathan. And then the second column I had is last name, and I'm changing it to HSU. And see here I have a third column, so I'm going to add one more here. Making it look nicer. The last column is called what is your title. So my data column name is title. So I'm putting trainer here. Now I should be all set to checking my headers and body and my URL. Perfect. So as you can see, after I send this request, at the response part, this ID of this record has been returned, which also indicates it's a successful request. And now I'm going back to iFormBuilder and refresh this page. And you can see that this record has been updated with the new information.
Penny, if I could interrupt for a second.
Sure.
We did have one question from the audience. They wanted to know, or they're a little bit confused about how this is automated if the access token expires in an hour. Would they have to continually go in and create a new access token, or is that going to be happening automatically?
Sure. So what I just showed you was a manual process. Ideally, you will want to write some codes and scripts to automate this process. So we do have some documentation in our help desk to guide you how to do that. So we use JWT. And if you're interested, you can search JWT in our help desk, and you can see that we do have some sample codes for you to use, like .NET and Java and probably Python too.
Cool, yeah. I'm going to, for everyone on the webinar, I'm going to go ahead and take that link and post it in the chat so everyone can have access to it if they'd like.
Sure, thank you, John.
No problem. Do you have any examples of doing that record update for a real project that you've worked on?
Sure. So just giving you a quick example for this kind of API request I just did. Let's say that you have the data stored in your own system and you will want to push them into iFormBuilder and assign them to your user's device. And we all know that it is not the best way to create or update record directly through iFormBuilder data page. And this is a perfect scenario where API can help you. You can use API to connect your own database in iFormBuilder database. And let's take a look at two use cases in real world in which we use API to help customers improve their workflows. So what you're looking at now is a custom web page we've done for one of our customers. It is a work order page, and what it does is when you input the work order number, it pulls all the information of that work order from multiple forms and then consolidate them into this one page. And you can print the order or generate report from there. So API saves all the manual work to go to iFormBuilder, log in, and look up the work order in each form and put them together. Now people only need to enter a number and hit a button. And here's a second project we've done for another customer. This second project does a similar thing. It's a project used in KFC kitchen. So this page looks up all the information of fryers they use in the kitchen by the fryer code and then display the information. What this project differs from the previous one is it not only pulls the data over from iFormBuilder, but also update the data in iFormBuilder. So the button at the bottom of this screenshot on the right side is to remove this fryer from the system completely. So these are just two quick examples just to give you some perspectives. And we have many custom projects using APIs. I like to invite you to think about how API can help you improve your own workflow. If any of you are interested in projects like this, please let us know, and we'd be happy to give you some suggestions or help you set up your project.
Hey Penny, could you do me a favor and go back to the first example? I just wanted to go through and talk through what I think it's doing just to make sure that I'm clear on it, and then you'll be able to let me know if I'm off base or not. But so what this interface is doing is you're able to enter in the work order number, which was part of the actual record. Once you submit, the API script in the background is going to request that record, and then it's going to display the values in the form below. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And then for the second one, could we go to that one? So this one is actually very similar, where you're going to look up the fryer here by putting in the code, and then it'll give you the information, right? Mm-hmm. And then it has a second component on top of it where you're able to fill out this web form and actually remove the fryer from, I guess, the location.
From the database in iFormBuilder.
Okay, so it actually removes the record.
Yes.
Okay, so those are examples of the different API calls that you're able to do.
Yep, exactly.
Very cool. And I also did want to contribute another use case for anybody who has gone through the iFormBuilder certification. You may have had to create a training environment and a training user where you filled out a really simple web form, and then you had a couple of things happen. The first thing that happens is that you actually have a profile created in the training environment. Inside of that profile, you'll have a user created, and you'll have forms assigned to you. So when you log in for that first time and you have this environment set up, what actually happened was a script that we had written was executed based on your web forms inputs. It took those values and using the API did all those steps automatically. So for anyone who's gone through the certification, I think that's a good example of where you can see the API being used. Now, I do have one third and final poll I wanted to launch. And so this poll is just a very simple questionnaire asking if you are currently enhancing your mobile data collection with the iFormBuilder API. Now, I have a yes split between two different responses. And because the reason I did this was I want to make sure people can understand that the API is not something where you need to immediately have a huge workflow around. You can start small and find ways to make your life and your work a little bit faster, a little bit smoother, and then slowly build out more and more solutions. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you have a workflow that was not possible before without the API. We'll leave this poll open for a couple more seconds. And also, while this poll is live, I did have another question come in about these two examples. The question is about if these two examples are working with live data from iFormBuilder or if they're in some other database. And I can go ahead and answer this actually because both of these are customers of ours. These are actual solutions that we've built out for them that use the API. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll in a second and share the results. So it looks like we actually have a good amount of people who are using the API. It looks like most of the people who are using the API are doing smaller API tasks that are focused on saving them some time with the automation, which is fantastic. We also have a good amount of people who are not using the API currently. And for those people, I really encourage you to continue learning about the API and trying to think of ways to be creative about your data collection and look into incorporating the API into your workflows. So to start wrapping up this webinar, I did want to make note to everybody that we'll be sending a copy of the recording to all attendees. We'll also be sending a copy of Penny's presentation materials that she's put together for us. And here we do have a set of 4 additional resources. The first one is a link to the iFormBuilder API documentation that Penny showed you. We also have a quick video on the iFormBuilder API, the article about how to get started with the API, and then finally, if working with the API as a whole is a little bit too intimidating for you, I put down here a web service called Zapier, which actually does software integrations, but in a more user-friendly way. It is limited because of the way it's structured, but it might be a good opportunity for you to get started and getting your hands wet working with an API. Penny, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Not really. This is pretty much what I want to talk about. And I really want to thank you all for taking your time and joining, and I hope this is helpful. Any comments and thoughts will be extremely appreciated. If some of you already have experience with API and expect something that's more advanced, please make sure to leave a comment with John, and we can have another webinar to dive deeper in the future. And thank you again, and have a good afternoon.
All right, thanks, Penny, and everybody take care.